Hey family group leaders, welcome to video training number 2. I apologize, these videos are getting a little longer than I had hoped for, but in this video I want to talk about how to create kingdom culture in our family groups. Now, one of the myths is that culture just kind of happens, right? I've been part of some amazing groups where there's amazing people, maybe amazing leadership, and it just clicked. But honestly, most of the time, I want to say like 70% of the time, I don't encounter great group environments. And so I want to just help us understand that cultures are created intentionally rather than stumbling on them by accident. Stumbling by accident just basically means that you're not creating a great culture. And so not only are family group leaders facilitators, but they're guardians of kingdom culture. And when I say guardians, they're also the people that help create it. So let's talk about kingdom culture just for a little bit. And I'm going to use this almost synonymously with safe culture or safe spaces in our family group leaders, in our family groups, because people are coming from so many different backgrounds. And whether you have 4 people or 10 people, it is people. And so things can get messy. There's different things that we just need to help champion. So number one, creating safe environments or kingdom culture is about number one is about empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand what somebody else is going through. Now, that doesn't always have to come from the family group leader, but that's something that we want to cultivate in our groups, that our people have empathy. What does empathy looks like? Well, it means that when someone is sharing, that number one, we're all paying attention to what they're saying, but ultimately that we are responsive to what we're hearing. If somebody's sharing about a really hard day they've gone through, some spiritual attack they had, we don't want to just be great at kind of nodding, but we want to get in there and make sure that they feel supported. So a couple ways that could look like, number one, as always kind of lean into what you feel like the Spirit of God is saying. But let it not be that someone shares vulnerably and we miss that moment, right? I've been part of some small groups where somebody, takes a big risk by sharing something vulnerably, and then people just go, "Oh," and kind of move on. That's a missed opportunity. That's not kingdom culture. And so when somebody's sharing vulnerably, and you kind of have to gauge, right? Is this a moment where we need to stop and kind of, as a group, pay attention and maybe even go into a prayer time, right? I mean, people just kind of listening for words, pausing just to speak words of truth over them. That isn't always going to be the case. So if you always do that, that's going to be overwhelming and overdoing it. But there are those moments, right? Sensitivity of the Holy Spirit, where it's like this person needs more than just, "Oh man, I'm really sorry to hear that." Okay, so I think the ability to empathize. There's a second part of empathy, and maybe I would include this as love, perhaps, is the ability to ensure that people feel heard. So, sometimes there's people in groups that aren't the best communicators, and I just want to say that's probably all of us at some point in time. And it's sometimes hard to understand what somebody's saying, or maybe somebody's saying something that doesn't seem to make any sense, or maybe contradicting things. I've just found it helpful for me to try to be the best listener that I can be. One of the ways I try to do that is even if something feels a little bit off, or I don't know, just kind of weird, I try to look for what is the gold in that, what they're sharing, that I could help affirm. Um, so maybe one way that looks like is if somebody's talking about a lot of negativity, and it could feel like that negativity is really affecting the group or could make the group feel like a downer. I might just kind of summarize like, "Oh, I think what I'm hearing from you is that you've had a really hard day, and it can feel like it can just feel like everything's like a downhill spiral. Is that correct?" That makes a person feel heard, that we focus and heard their heart more than the um, I don't know, the odd content, if you will. And then of course we can help the group kind of help shape that for that person. It's just important for people to feel heard. Otherwise, if we just judge people by their content, which isn't always clear, right? People are just kind of throwing stuff out there. people could feel judged. So the empathy is huge, and I think part of that empathy is making sure people feel heard, which is the version of love. Um, Another way that we can create kingdom culture is honestly celebrating the right things. So when people choose to be vulnerable, we want to say, "Hey, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for going there." In our celebrations or affirmations of kind of the right behaviors, so to speak, we're kind of teaching the group um, to model that, if you will. We're trying to teach the group that vulnerability is great, and so it's creating almost safety for people to go into some hard places. So I think just noticing things, paying attention to things, and just celebrating that or affirming that aloud can be really helpful for your group. And then the final thing is making sure that in love we're also guarding the group against certain dynamics. And I say certain dynamics because we aren't per se guarding people against people. We are sometimes, but most of the time people don't actually know or aren't aware of the things that's coming out of them. So one example is, let's say you have a person that is constantly dominating the conversation. Their words may even sound assertive to the point where it's getting borderline aggressive. My guess is they're feeling it emotionally, right? But they aren't seeing themselves as a quote unquote villain, so to speak, nor should they ever be seen as a villain. But I guess what I'm bringing up is there's a certain way that is not going to be helpful for the group, right? When one person dominates, and if we don't say anything about that, if we don't do that, we're letting them affect the entire group, right? We're almost people pleasing one person to the detriment of 10 other people. So, as family group leaders, we are also guardians to ensure that we are helping a person who is not helpful to almost try to avoid that or stop that behavior, so to speak, and then kind of redirect that. So, if somebody's dominating the group, or maybe there's just stuff coming out of them for a moment, um, sometimes I'll just like, hey, thank you so much. That was really great. Because sometimes if it's going on for 10 minutes and you feel like you can't get a word in, it's really important that at some point you do. And it's okay to kind of, I wouldn't say take positional authority as a family group leader, but take spiritual authority that God has given us in a loving and nice manner to say, hey, thanks for sharing. Maybe we can talk about that another time. Or, hey, that was really, I really appreciate you bring that up. Let's give some other people a chance to share. And then, of course, if the people are getting very aggressive, certain things just need to stop, right? If you need to stop the group to address that person, that's when it's getting very extreme. You need to do it. Or some things can be talked about with that person after family groups or after Kingdom Space. Those conversations need to be had in a loving but truthful manner for the sake of that person, but also for the sake of your group. So there are things that you celebrate, but there's also things that you tolerate to only so much. And again, you're not tolerating the person, you're not intolerant of the person, but of that dynamic that now is entering your group. So we play multiple roles, right? We empathize, so we're a loving, listening ear. We are champions of love and helping people to feel connected. We're also people who teach people kind of like the things to go for in the kingdom. We're celebrators, but also we're guardians. We're guardians of what God has called us to steward. And that to me is really what it means to almost be a shepherd and a pastor, is not just to help people feel cared for, but in leadership, it's protecting people, including the person that we feel like may be violating that cultural standard. We're also protecting them, right? By giving them the opportunity to grow and teaching them that certain things really aren't the right ways to go about it, and then addressing it, right? Because without someone speaking truth to them, they're going to continue to live out that cycle, which is unhealthy for everyone. So I hope that's helpful. Part of being a small group leader in kingdom culture, and just those quick ones, are just creating a place of empathy, listening, which I paired with love, celebrating the right things, calling it out with affirmations, and then, of course, making sure that we guard our group against certain dynamics and able to address that in a nice, tactful, sometimes not so tactful way, in a way that helps the group and helps that person as well.